Broward County since the age of 6. He's very proud of that. And he attended Grant Easy High School in Pompano and went on to graduate in government from George Washington University in D.C., at which time he was an intern for Congressman Alcee Hastings. Corey's worked on technology projects in schools in Miami-Dade, Broward, as well as City of Tamarack, Defense Department, U.S. Geological Survey, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. He's the immediate past president of the Broward County Democratic Black Caucus, and he serves as an advisor to my brother's Keeper Alliance of Community Partners, Look Through My Eyes, and Blind Faith Forever, and he's a passionate advocate for his Broward County hometown. So thank you, Corey. Okay, I'm also going to introduce Don Mizell, Dr. Don Mizell. Don is a native of Broward who desegregated the public schools in 1963 at Nova High. My daughter went to Nova High, so it's very interesting to me. He also he's a Swarthmore College graduate and a Harvard-trained lawyer specializing in intellectual property. He's an award-winning producer, and he's currently making a documentary film on the history of Broward County called Paradise Lately. He also he's serving a second 2-year term on the U.S. Civil Rights Commission in Florida, the U.S. Civil Rights Commission Florida Committee, focusing on voting rights. So thank you, Don. And our moderator, and she is in the media, but WLRN is not negative news. Sorry. Nadesh Green, who I listen to all the time, so I'm a bit of a fangirl. She covers social justice issues for WLRN, so she'll be steering our conversation, and not sure where it goes or whatever. Nadesh was recognized by the National Association of Black Journalists with 3 first-place awards for investigative reporting, long-form and short-form, reporting on policing in Miami-Dade's Black communities. Nadesh's work has also been honored by the Florida AP Broadcasters Awards. She's previously worked with the Miami Herald, covering local city governments and the Haitian community. And it might be that this is the only really good mic, but there are other mics.
Okay. Work, you just got to talk kind of
Loudly back and forth, and if you need some water.
There might be some good mics out there as well, so nothing disparaging against mics.
Okay.
Check.
All right, we'll just jump right in.
No.
Oh boy. Thank you for having me. I think it's very interesting to be having a conversation about race relations right now. It's a very timely conversation to be having. And I also think we do a really bad job in general as a community, as media, talking about race, racism, race relations, and what that means. We don't like to name things, so we use a lot of euphemisms. We don't like to say black, we call it low income, or we call it inner city, even when it's in the suburbs, because it's majority black. So I think it's important to have those conversations, to have those uncomfortable conversations, and to be honest in those conversations about what we're talking about, because if we don't name it, then we actually don't know what we're talking about. So I will open with just this question to the gentleman on either side of me, which is like, what or how would you describe the state of race relations, specifically here in South Florida?
Yeah.
And if you want to broaden it to the state of Florida, that's fine, but specifically in our own backyard where we are.
Yeah, thank you. To be honest, I think that we have to look at it, and I think we live in a world that at this point is multifaceted, has come a long way. We're in an era where we have access to social media, access to historical documents, but we also have issues with the impact of media and the internet on people when you have things like memes that go out and fake pictures and fake stories that propagate negative stereotypes, and they're being used by negative groups who become very good at it. I mean, I was watching an episode of Vice News where somebody, talking about what they're using as far as in Nazi propaganda, that you all think of it as a chore. We take it as a video game, and the game to be won, and they're really good at it. And so we have the competing, I think, and maybe we're all feeling this crunch, right? That we all have embraced each other a little bit better. It's not just Pollo Tropical, right? We enjoy, real Colombian food and real Venezuelan food, and we enjoy soul food, and we know the difference between Haitian food and Ethiopian food, and Southern Black American food and North, so
You sound hungry.
right, exactly. Now I'm just stuck on food. Somebody feed me, But we're embracing this. We're embracing music. We're embracing culture. You have an Oscar moment where you have both Denzel and Halle Berry, not only nominated but winning. And we've gone well past that. And you've seen movies like Moonlight, and movies are well received with kind of, think about the content that's in Moonlight, right? That some people may not even be comfortable with. But yet, a movie like that from, Blacks in America have the opportunity to make a movie like that and see it, well received and see it actually celebrated and also make money, right? So we have that, but we also have the negative side that's happening. And I think people are doubling down on that side, and we're not realizing, maybe tripling down, right? While we're doubling down. So for me, I think, I think that race relations have improved because I think we have to be honest. I think those that don't, by the way, want to be nice to people from other races, they're not being so, at least they're being more honest, right? And those of us who do want to embrace each other and do want to embrace multiculturalism and also, respect for our fellow human being, we're able to do that. And we're having conversations like this. I'm in here today, I don't feel threatened or anything like that. I'm doing, again, I'll be honest, I want to address, and I love Anne Marie. I wanted to wait till you were done speaking. I don't want to, you don't need to belabor this, but, I know, at one point you're accused of using, the N word, and you said that came from Boston. And I've been in Boston, been around Boston. I know how that goes. At some point I probably would sit down with you after this, by the way, and I don't need to answer this public forum, but for me, I really want to know where did, that come from? And the people that put that out against you, even in like 2007, were they just using it to hurt you, right? Or how deep does that go? But again, Anne, and I have respect for you, been respectful to me. We still have to wonder. Here I am, I'm listening to her and I have love for her, but you still wonder, what's the deal here, right? And I still think we're left to that point, right? Where we're like, what is the deal here, right? And we all have to, in the end, answer that. But I really think that I'm hoping that what we will do is start celebrating each other. We'll start actually enjoying each other. I have a friend, Trevor Fagan, his dad wrote a book on how the fact that whites in the South actually hurt even their young white daughters, right? Because they couldn't love, the nanny that they may have had, or they couldn't love the black or some person of color that they loved in college, but yet this is a celebrated white princess, and they were hurt by this. It really amazed Mr. Fagan from University of Florida, University of Texas, sociology. He's talked about, hey, we're only hurting ourselves, right? If you're gonna do things that hurt your white princess, right, daughter, right, then you're willing to go to any lengths to hurt anybody else. But more importantly, you're hurting the ones that you love. When we can't celebrate each other, enjoy good music, good food, a good discussion, I think we've come to some realization, some of us, that we're hurting ourselves. Now the problem is, there's some people that don't mind us being hurt, and that's where I'm at on that.
Don?
What's your question?
Sorry about that.
Succinctly,
I'm about to get
for
out.
what you
you,
were asking.
what is the state of race relations here in your own backyard, where we are?
I don't hear Mike. So I can't say that I know what the state of race relations is here. Not really, but I think to really understand whatever it is, we have to understand the history of how we got to these facts that Corey's talking about, the diversity and some inclusion. We really, to understand where we need to go, we have to know from whence we have come. That's the value of history. And so I was thinking we were going to say, well, where have we been and where are we going? So I'd like to talk about that,
Absolutely.
which would contextualize where we are, sort of. But I think fundamentally, we should really understand from whence we have come. And I was born in the segregation era here. And my parents and my grandparents came along when white supremacy was the ruling ideology and was really viciously applied. At the same time, Broward County was never a slave county. And so, but Florida was a slave state. Now, people don't think about that much because you don't think of plantations when you think of Florida. But there were some, but it was, you know, northern Florida, as you already know, Trayvon Martin, whatever, is really Mississippi. And in some ways, it's even worse for certain reasons I don't want to get sidetracked into. But at the end of the day, Broward County was never a slave county. Now, my theory is that wherever there was slavery, you have a vested interest in white supremacy that is supremely to be defended, because you had centuries of black folks working for nothing under the lash and the gun or whatever it was. And so people have a memory and a actual objective vested interest in what used to be the good old days. And that's where you find the most resistance to desegregation, diversity, and the rest of it right now. Anywhere you go. If there was slavery, well, that's really much more of a problem with race, diversity, etc. Broward County, though, was never a slave county for reasons that are peculiar. And this is what my film is about, Paradise Lately, which is being co-produced by Lori Schechter. Where's Lori? She's somewhere hiding,
right there.
I know.
Back row.
But the film is a documentary on the history of Broward, and the story is basically that Broward County emerged out of a swamp in 1915. There was nobody here at all, let alone plantations and slavery. It didn't even exist until 65 years after slavery ended in 1950 or around there. But it still was plagued by a tremendous amount of racist white supremacy segregation. But still, it didn't have that undergirding of slavery. And my theory is that even though there was virulent racism, segregation, and all of that, it never rose to the level in the rest of the Deep South that had slavery. There was nobody here except the swamp and the Indians, the Seminoles, who were hiding in the swamp, who had escaped from the north of Florida to avoid having to submit to oppression. They would rather go and be with the snakes and the alligators and the mosquitoes than to interact with white supremacist society. And there were Negroes who were runaways from slavery in North Florida who had joined forces with the Seminoles to escape as well. But when they got down here, they kept going. The Negroes went on to the Bahamas. They didn't want to be in the swamp with the mosquitoes and the alligators. Okay? They went to the Bahamas. Now, people don't know this story, that the first people here were Negroes and Indians, but the Negroes left. They were like, see you later, nice knowing you, okay? I'm fixing to go where the beach is, where the Negroes are in the majority, okay? All right, but there was a swamp, so it was just a swamp. Broward, the governor, drained the swamp, and because he wanted to turn it into agricultural land, which they did. And that's when Broward, which was a part of Palm Beach and Dade County, became Broward County, because once the land was arable, they wanted to be a county. And so they fought and carved out Broward County out of the swamp and out of Dade and Palm Beach. Well, now, what's the relevance of that? Well, the relevance of that is that nobody was here. Everybody's a migrant here. Everybody came from somewhere else. And the people who, including the Seminoles, nobody had a stake in the past. It was always about the future. Always. Always about, I'm going to take this shithole and make it into something that I can benefit from. That is the fundamental ethos of the evolution of Broward County. That is our story. And every single person in Broward County came from somewhere else because they were looking for a better way. And it wasn't about stopping the person who was there. It was about don't get in my way when I'm trying to do my thing. And nobody was trying to get in anybody's way because nobody felt they had that much of a stake in it in the past to defend. And nobody was trying to come here because this had been a swamp. So it was enough room. Okay? And but the first part of Broward County's story is Whitey versus the Negroes. Okay? There were no Latinos and all this, even though Florida had been a Spanish colony and all this, they were all gone. They were all in Cuba. It was just white people versus black people, and the black people were, there was a line, and you better not be over here after dark, because we will hang you, burn you, whatever. But the black men who came from North Florida looking for freedom found it in a way that was not characteristic of the Deep South, because they were migrants who came here looking for the same opportunity, and there was nobody to block them unless they were over there across in Whitetown after dark. If not, they weren't going to be messed with. But that was the Ku Klux Klan and the sheriff who were in cahoots and who were corrupt, were riding that line. Don't be over here. And we don't want the men over here, period. But the men didn't want to be over there because they wanted to go farm their own land. They were not sharecropping on a plantation. They had found their own land. And you didn't have to pay for it. You just had to work it. So it was like homesteading, which was not usually allowed in the Deep South for black folks. But in Broward County, that was the case. And my grandfather came down here in a horse and buggy in 1908. He said, look, we didn't have to pay. You just had to go get your land and work it. So it was all about sweat of the brow and being independent, and then take your whatever you grew over to the train depot and load it up and get paid, and it would go up the road. Dania was the Danes growing tomatoes. Hollandale was the Dutch, and everybody was farming. If you had some tomatoes, you could sell them.
But in context in 2018 now, like fast forward to where we are now, we do know that I've covered Broward and I follow the coverage of Broward County, that there have been tensions on race issues still today and in the recent past, et cetera.
Absolutely.
So
totally.
My question is, where we are now, what is that status and what does that look like?
Well, I'm not sure if I can answer it, because what I am trying to say is that you still have the element of white racism, but you don't have the undergirding resistance of a slaveocracy. That's number one. Number two, that the fight for desegregation, which my uncle was the leader of in the 20th century in many, many ways, took place in the 60s at a time when, because of the lack of a slaveocracy and all this, there was no mob violence and no police brutality, which was not characteristic of the South. And I'm saying that's rooted in our unique history geographically, environmentally. That's the story.
And how do you think that impacts how people relate to each other
Well,
now?
well, you keep trying to go to now, but I'm from history, so
Right.
I
No,
just
I
have to keep
understand the
going.
context, but-
I gotta just do it the way I see it. And what I'm saying is this: in the 70s, when the first waves of additional migrants and immigrants came, I'm saying that I believe that they came because there had not been police brutality and mob violence. That was the magnet that led to the explosive growth and diversity that we have, that Corey's talking about. How did we get here? Why are all these different groups here now? And why are they not wrapped in some kind of a vicious fight? I'm not saying it's not racism. It is, and it has been. But what I'm saying is, it's complicated and it's nuanced. And what you have is, people came here when the Rust Belt melted down in the 70s, when the Jamaicans, your people, and the Caribbean folks started coming, when the Haitians, when they looked around, where did they want to go? Did they want to go where there was police brutality and mob violence over race? No. That had been worked out because of the curious nature of the dynamics where the desegregation was negotiated by the county people who wanted to build tourism, and that's the death knell of tourism, and the black folks who used it carefully as a leverage point and Achilles heel to extract concessions that other people were not getting in a way that made it possible for so much of what the black folks who are in the bureaucracy now and all this other stuff that happened here that didn't happen elsewhere. It's because, I'm saying it's because of the particular factors. So what is my point? My point is that we are in a very unique little cauldron here that has peculiar historical factors that really are relevant to how we got here and the way to think about the way forward. That is the point.
I think it's interesting that you both talk about diversity in Miami, because I often say, like, we're diverse by default, but not by intention. This wasn't a place that was like, okay, welcome everyone. I think diversity, especially in the Latin American and Caribbean community, is because of where we're located. It's easy to get here, right? It's why you don't see an influx of Haitians in Alabama or in the Midwest. They're here. And New York.
Proximity.
Mostly. Right, it's the proximity to Latin America and the Caribbean, not necessarily because this is one of the most equitable places to be in the world as a person of color. So I'm curious to hear you, Corey, talk about when we talk about
but
diversity.
They go to New York too.
Correct.
Yeah,
They
which
go
is easy to
where
get
they
to.
are welcome. And so what they did not find was rejection. They weren't welcomed, but they weren't rejected. And that is, but they would have been rejected in a lot of other areas, and they weren't here. And that has everything to do with.
There was rejection.
Well, when I say rejection, I mean, they tried to send the Haitians back, but my point
That's
is
rejection.
They can reject you and make you stay here
No,
too,
but
you know?
wait-
There's
but wait a-
rejection and
wait a minute.
invite you
There
in.
are more Haitians than Jamaicans right now who
Correct.
didn't stick,
The
okay?
Jamaicans are the second largest population.
I know, and the Haitians
of
are the
Caribbean
first,
background.
so
And
they
first,
didn't
yes.
get too rejected for too long either. That's the
Or they
point I
kept
want to
coming.
make. They
Right.
kept coming, so in other words, the rejection was not that, they tried to, and then they caved.
And create a community here.
They caved, the white folks caved.
Well, I want to get to your point.
But on the issue of diversity in Miami, I mean,
course.
in Miami-Dade and Broward County, in our region, we often talk about diversity as if it's this great erasure of we're diverse, so there's no racism here, or we don't have ethnic tensions here. But I think Miami and Miami-Dade, Broward County are especially different in that not only sometimes are you dealing with issues of black and white, you're also dealing with ethnicity, right? And so you're dealing with, well, I'm Haitian American, I'm Jamaican American, and the tensions that exist there. I'm Cuban American, I'm Venezuelan, and the tensions that exist there, and what black or whiteness means in that context. Because you could very well be Cuban in Miami and self-identify as white, and you can be a number of other Latin American, from different Latin American countries and identify as white in Miami in a way that is very different from other parts of the country. I have Cuban friends who will say, I'm white in Miami, but when I go to Tallahassee, they tell me I'm not white, right? So when we talk about what diversity means and how we interact with each other here, what have you seen and how are we doing when it comes to actually addressing this? Because we're very much segregated still, and we still very much live in our bubbles, ethnically, racially, across the county lines.
Yeah, all right. Well, actually, I'd like to deal with that first by talking about some case studies, right? I mean, real life, the reality of it. In Hollywood here, obviously, we have the street name issue, and I gotta tell you, I don't even watch Forrest Gump the same way anymore, right? There's a part in Forrest Gump where he talks about being named after somebody who didn't like many people, and I never got that, but obviously you as a city got that, right? I mean, that's almost everybody, right? Regardless of color. I think that encapsulates basically where we're at, where for a while people were like, not even aware, right, of the fact that you had streets named after like a grand wizard of the KKK, and streets named after people who were real supreme, I'd like to say assholes, but I mean, not only that, but racist as well, And people were either didn't know about it or were okay with it. Okay, then now when you're presented with it, right, which is kind of where we are now, right? So we're talking about, from like the 50s to the 60s, and then till now where you're presented with it, we have an understanding of it, people still are like, what's the big deal? And I'm gonna tell you that there were some black folks, they're like, what's the big deal, It's like, I want to use the N word, because I want to, I want to break the power of words over me. So they still wonder, like, what's the power in the street name? I know Don knows a lot about this, but I'll just talk about it in the context of Hollywood. Maybe you can talk about it in the grander scale. But, I think people started to have a discussion, right? And they started to also fight about it, and to people stood up, and their voices were heard. And we came to realize that, no, you can't have street names named for people, not only because the hurt that it really renders, right, to a group of people who feel like, hey, if this name is there, then, how much value do I have? Why is money put into cleaning, making sure the signs are there, and the upkeep of basically the sign and this name becomes the upkeep, right, of the racist attitudes, right? I think we started to embrace that, and we started to say, no, I've got to not, weaken you, right? And I've got to stand up as well in 2017, and I've got to say no to this now and change it. So we came to that realization, let's change the names, right? And then Don has another piece, and you can talk to that about actually empowering people, right? So we got to the part of not breaking people down, all right? So at least we've gotten there, and we've gotten some discussion. That's on that. But let me also talk about beyond that.
Talk about the Caribbean,
right?
And the Black African American.
Exactly. So. What I'd like to talk to, and for me, sometimes I feel like I'm a voyeur, right? And I'll give you a reason why. I don't feel part of any group. I can chat, I'm a yard boy still. I can chat, and yardie and all that. But, to be honest, I was born in Brooklyn. I'm actually, not so much because of choice. My dad wasn't married, but he was Prime Minister of Jamaica.
Father was the
My
Prime
mom,
Minister of
my mom
Jamaica.
got pregnant for him. There were some issues, even the couple prime ministers who were great to me and had me over and fed me ice cream and took care of me and loved me to this day, they wanted her to have an abortion, quite frankly, right? So she, gets away from drama and comes to Brooklyn and has me, and I will be ever forever indebted to her for that. But there's part of me that, I'm very much Jamaican, I'm when I go to Jamaica, a lot of times they call me Yankee. They had in country, they had to warm up water for me because I'm American. I can't bathe in cold water. So my cousins would have to carry it, all over the place, and they probably hated me, But I have this duality of being like Jamaican and also being very much all-American. I gotta tell you, I have grown up in this country, and I've never not felt like an all-American kid. I never needed blonde hair. I didn't need blue eyes. Some of the greatest people in my life that have affected me and done things for me that are ridiculous have been white or have been, maybe Haitian or African American. And that's why I have so much love for my county. But at the same time, I've had instances of, racism. And I come from Blanche Ely, right? Where Blanche Ely, and this is where the history gets, and we don't dig in too much into it, but this exists. Blanche Ely, they were called the bean pickers, right? And that was really because people were making fun, right? But they also had a lack of respect. And people fought against that, eventually became the Ely Tigers, Blanche Ely, and I'm very proud of that, but I wouldn't want to be the bean pickers. But listen, if people's attitudes didn't change, we'd still be the bean pickers right now. And people would be enjoying that and reveling that in some cases, and other people would just be letting that happen to us. And that's the thing that you have to fight about, in your case. Then you go on to the fact that, and this is just me growing up, again, this is the All-American Corey Scherer, Senior of the Year at Georgetown University. Some of the people from this county sent me to school. I go to Coral Square Mall. I'm shopping with my mom. She goes to get some coffee. I have two of my white friends from Blanche Ely, integrated school, kind of, right? We never really get full integration, but they're at the mall too, and I'm talking to them. The cops come down on me because I've got African colors on, and they want to know what's going on here. What gang are you part of? What's going on, right? And this is the way, I'll tell you the more sophisticated part of it, but it's the fact that I was a young black, not an old black, not a doctor, not a lawyer, not somebody over 30 or 40, but I was a young black shopping at Coral Square Mall in Coral Springs, and we weren't welcome, okay? And they sent the message to me. And I sent the message back, because I'm on my way to meet Hunter Biden, Vice President Biden's son, and teach with 8 other students, and teach for 6 weeks in Belize, and I'm at Georgetown, I'm like, Ivy League, almost. And I tell them, hey, you work for me. And I came down and let them know, you're not gonna come, you work for me. Don't talk to me like that. You work for me, back off.
Right.
Okay, so they took me down, they arrested me. All right, I stood up for myself, right? All right, they took me down, they arrested me. My mom's wondering, walking the parking lot, where's my son? Where's the kid who's going to go teach for 6 weeks in Belize, with the Jesuits and with the senator at that time, son. And just to understand this, I'd hope that you'd be appalled by that. To this day, I can't imagine the horror my mom felt, trying to wonder, like, where's my kid? And it's the police who took me, not a rapist, not a serial killer, but the police of Coral Springs took her son. And listen, here's where it gets even more, where this case gets very complex. My older Coral Springs relatives were like, "What did you do?" Because everybody in Coral Springs loves educated blacks, and loves blacks that have money, and they love the sports figures. They want to know, what did you do? Because they treat me so well here. I'm invited to parties. They don't invite other black people. They invite me. I got it made. What did you do? So even from that standpoint, you have to look at, that it's a complex issue of, you see somebody who's all-American. After that, I still felt all-American. I just wonder, what the hell is going on here? And if you look at this, you've had this happen throughout history. You had the Stack brothers. I guess one was an attorney, one was a judge or something. One was a police chief, something like that. They used to arrest blacks and just make them, just for walking across the street, jaywalking, and they'd have to work it off by working in the field. It's just an easy way to get them to get manual labor, right, without having slavery. This is Broward County, and this is Broward County that we're all a part of. The way it looks like to me is that if you look at the mixture of races, right, if you look at the mixture of generations, by the way, we all have to come to grips with the things that are done, either by us or against us, with our cooperation, that really degrade other people, and we have to continue to fight against that. And then when I mention that, I'll even talk in the Latino community. You have, Ecuadorians, Argentinians, who consider themselves white. A lot of them, are white seeming. Some of them are Jewish. Some are different races, and they're Latino, but they're white. And there's racism that happens there, where you have if you're on a military Argentinian ship, you have blacks that are told to go below board, below deck, and the whites at the port of call are out there. To this day, there's still people that think like that and act like that, right? So it happens across all races, across all ethnicities. I think what we're left with, right, is that when you look at the state of today, the state is recognizing, right, that these things have happened, they continue to happen. We are actually victimized by them, right? And that's whether you're white, black, like I said, Professor Fagan at University of Florida talks about, Southern whites, how they were victimized by their own racism. So we have to figure out today how to come to grips with the reality, right, of these things, and how do we actually address it, and how do we overcome it? That's the first point I'd like to make. But I do think Hollywood, for example, has made you have a great case study, right, on how you can recognize it, and it doesn't have to be that not everybody's on the same page regardless of race, right? But you have to come to the agreement that we're going to uplift people, we're going to respect people for who they are, and we have to really dig in and fight for that. That's where I'm at on that.
I just want to say, for the Hollywood case on the street renamings, that the commission didn't just wake up and say, oh my gosh, this is bad and we should rename the streets, right? That was through absolute action from within the community. And to be clear, that this didn't happen in 2017, right? This issue had come before the commission many times before.
True.
Up until nationally, it became an issue that was shaming governments across the country.
Right.
And then, with action, you saw change, but it was not, when we talk about the state recognizes or government recognized, they didn't just recognize, right? Because those streets had been named that for a long time. And so I just wanted, for context, as we're talking about history and like how things come to be, this came to be because of protests, this came to be because of people continuously showing up at those commission meetings, and this came at a time where nationally it is unpopular to have monuments to the Confederacy that uplifted and fought for, it was the most violent war in American history, right? Like 750,000 soldiers died to uphold the system that propped up slavery. And so this was about people who actually came forward and pushed the commission. It wasn't, they recognized,
Some which actually
right?
see here, as well.
So I think
Jasmine,
context is
I
also
want to
important
recognize
in
Jasmine
that.
Rogers in the audience and other people who definitely have done amazing on the front lines work on this.
And so since we're at a Democratic club, let's talk about the Democratic Party. When we talk about race and equity in the state of Florida, especially here in South Florida, we have seen after the election of President Donald Trump, a lot of people have been talking about, not, especially in the Black community, especially in minority communities, people of color, who say, we show up for the Democratic Party. Does the Democratic Party show up for us? Does the Democratic Party show up and address the issues that most impact its strongest base, or what some have called its strongest base, Black women, Black men, people of color, and what are some of those issues, right? And how do you bring politics into equity? Because we talk about it as if it's like, this very vague thing, race, racism, and equity, but what are the things that you can actually do? What are policies? What are the things that can be enacted to reverse what were policies that created the system in the first place, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't need a mic.
You don't need to.
So I can't help it. I always have to contextualize whatever I'm trying to say. I'm usually driving to the point you're after immediately, though, and I will wind up there.
We will work together.
Okay. But let me just say this about this racism business, okay? The issue of diversity does not automatically mean inclusion. Segregation was diversity. It was whitey versus the Negroes, okay? And the Indians in the swamp. That was diversity. So that's a term that we use to suggest that everybody's getting along and this and that. But that's not automatically what that means. Without inclusion, diversity can be segregation, or it could be, whatever. So let's just get that straight. But we in Broward have the most diverse setup imaginable, and it allows us to be in a unique position to show the way forward for how to handle diversity in a progressive, inclusive manner. And that has a lot to do with the unique history that I talked about. So, and let me just talk about the Latino white thing. Most of the Caribbean Black folks started out in Miami, but the Cubans, who are very racist, because they were a slave culture, okay? The Cubans who came over here, who got all these privileges and all this stuff, because they were anti-communist, anti-Castro, they came from a slaveocracy. They had a deeply embedded racism that they immediately used to suppress Black folks who were there, who moved, and also to encourage the Caribbean Black folks to move along. And so there was a churn into Miami and then up to Broward, where you didn't have that same domination by either white folks or Cubans who thought they were white, who had a real white supremacist attitude towards people of color. Even though they themselves are not exactly white, they declared themselves. So that's something we don't want to overlook. I'm saying that Broward has a unique opportunity to sort this out in a way that may be relevant to, and as an example of the way forward for the country. Because there is no dominant group. There's 1/3 white folks, and most of them are either old, who were not looking for any trouble and came here to retire, or they came from elsewhere and they have money and they're young and they want to. Then you got 1/3 Black folks, but half of those are Caribbean Negroes, Black folks, and the other are African Americans, and half of those are from the North who just came down here because they got tired of the bullshit up there. And they're not since the 90s. And then the other third are the Latinos, who are not organized and united themselves either, because they're not. It's not like the Cubans have a stranglehold on Dave. So you got a bunch of different groups within each group. The blacks are not united, but they're not divided. The white folks are not against them like that, but they do like being white because of its privileges. And then you got the Latinos who don't want to be under the foot of the Cubans either, and are not that wedded to enslavocracy cultures unless that's where they came from, and many of them did. So you got a funny little situation here with all these different groups that are all fresh and new and looking around and trying to move forward. They're not really against anybody, but they don't want anybody to get in their way either. And we got to figure out how to take this and turn it into something that is a dynamic way forward. That is the challenge. But we're in a great position to be able to do it, is my position. Now, the biggest problem is white supremacy. It's the legacy, the residue that you talk about. It's there. It doesn't go away easy because it's chock full of privileges that, however unearned, feel good with you're getting them. The ones who don't feel that they can compete are the ones who are the most resistant to the progress. The white folks who have money and are smart, they're not too worried about it because they know they can how to do their thing. But that's not most white folks. It's a significant number, and they're immigrants, so they came from elsewhere, so they have self-selected. They got game. But that's, you usually have, the Trump white folks, that are not too bright, and they don't have too many skills anymore. They're good people, don't get me wrong, but they feel threatened by the changes. They don't have the factory job that pays them the union wage for the rest of their life, and they're concerned, and if they have to resort to white to defend, they'll do it. That's instinctive, it's reflexive. I understand that. But if they see another way to get what they need to survive and move forward without having to squash people, they can learn new responses, is my theory. And I believe that that takes a concerted effort, that's what the Democratic Party should be doing, wherever they are, is going at those people and really getting them to see that racism is not the answer, and it's their own racism, but there's ways to get this done without blaming the people of color or women or whatever they are doing. And that work is not being done properly. I like what Bernie's talking about, but Bernie doesn't have as good a grasp of the issues of color because, he's from fucking Vermont, It's a problem. But I like Bernie, and Bernie understands that he doesn't understand. At least he knows that. Bernie's my man. Okay? Now, what I'm driving at is that the black folks need to figure out how they can unify better or they won't get the political power that they could have. And by that, Corey, I'm talking about, and I've talked about this, the Caribbean black folks and the African Americans getting together. Now, the African Americans who are from here, like myself, their legacy, but most of the smart black people from my generation, they left. Because when they left, it was whitey versus the Negroes. And they had no intention of coming back, and that was me too. Now, how I wound up coming back here is a whole nother story, but when I left, I had no intention either. There's a whole nother set of black folks, professionals, who came in the 90s who were disenchanted with the failed promises and the retrenchment and backlash in the North, who came looking for opportunity. And this is not a slavocracy culture, and they came, but they're not united. They don't give a shit about the past. They didn't come here for the past. They came for the future. So you got the black folks who left here, who come from here, they're not the best and the brightest. They're gone. But the best and the brightest of black professionals from across the country have showed up since the 90s. How do you make that work? And then you've got this first wave of...
On behalf of native-born black millennials,
Okay.
I would just like to interject and say that there are plenty of bright black native-born folks from South Florida who did not leave and who are still very much present.
Okay, and look, I absolutely don't want to overstate the case and dispute that. But I was driving, my point was with Corey and I have talked about the failure of the Caribbean black population to unify dynamically with the black folks who are African Americans. And if that doesn't happen, then they won't get the full benefit of the political power they otherwise will have. And the Latino,
All of us as a group, you say.
huh?
All of us as a group, really.
I'm just saying, but that's the challenge. And you are uniquely positioned, being all of the above, to be able to see it better and possibly help better, as we've already discussed in the past. It's not new. Then you got all these Latinos who, and they're small amounts, but they add up to 1/3 of the population. But, you know, the Ecuadorians, Colombia, you name it. Venezuelans, it's a lot. The challenge is, how do you unify and through inclusion to take diversity and make it a strength? And that the Democratic Party can play a crucial role, getting to your point, which is this. In my view, first of all, the Democratic Party needs to stop pussyfooting with black folks and go in there and talk to them and show them that they're for them in ways that speak directly to their interests and needs and concerns, which they talk about broadly, but I mean very specifically. And until they do that and actually value black women who are their most loyal and best, you know, and welcome them and don't just want to use them at election time, then it ain't going to happen. They're going to keep getting beat by the Republicans, who know how to unify, if nothing else, and make the smallest minority be the biggest one that wins, and Trump's a proof of that. Okay, but the black folks, the Latinos, they've got to really understand that they have to sort out how to find a dynamic, unifying framework that accommodates inclusion and is not afraid of it and speaks directly to their particular interests, but also, more importantly, the common ground, the common cause, the common good that we all benefit from. Now that's tricky, it's complicated, it's nuanced, but that's the work.
And on that note, it's tricky, it's complicated and nuanced, but we would like to open it up to questions, if possible. I don't know how much longer we have. No one has given me a hand.
Let's say 15 minutes.
That's
Yeah,
perfect.
could I have 2 minutes just to say something real quick on Democrat? I'll hold it to 2 minutes.
2 minutes. I
Yep,
work in radio,
okay,
so I
yeah,
time people.
Okay, time me right now. All right, just real quick, and I'll borrow the mic for this. I just want to say that, you know, and as a Democrat, a proud Democrat, you know, that the state of Democratic Party is one that it's crappy, right? We need to actually be scared. I want to sound the alarm here that basically you're talking about, you know, people who are upset with the way this recent election went down, turned off by Donald Trump, turned off by the antics of the Democratic Party, whatever happened with Hillary and buying in there and working against Bernie and so forth, that state's not good. Then you look at the fact just locally, all right, for blacks, that our money, and this is not against, you know, Cynthia Bush, our current party chair, because I'll say it happened with Mitch too, that money comes from the black community, it comes from the FDP, right? Some of which we send up as black folks and hardworking door-to-door folks, and it comes down to their black folks, right? And then it trickles down into the black community where it barely gets there, right? The Democratic Party is doing a terrible job of getting money, getting support, getting bodies and people and answers to the black community. Then if you look on top of that, the fact that black media gets like $300,000. The person who runs that, controls that, whose family has been in for years and has every right and has value, she takes $100,000 off the top because she's worth $100,000. I'm not saying anything bad about her. That leaves like $200,000 for black media across the state. Our candidates do nothing really to support black media. The party does nothing to support black media. The other thing is that if you look at
Who are you talking about?
the party itself,
The party?
yeah, exactly. And so on average,
Some of us aren't active enough in the party in a detailed sense to know who you mean.
Yeah.
oh, right. Well, I don't think I have to really, I mean, do you want me to, I have to
If you're
start
not
calling
gonna name-
names?
If you're not gonna name
Well,
names.
well, I mean, honestly, we had the past chair of, right, but I'm saying like the past chair of the party, right, and even like Mitch Caesar, right, and the current chair of the Broward Party, I'm saying they're not doing their part to really make sure that the black issues are addressed.
I think she
The
was
Florida
referencing the
Democratic
black media
Party,
part where you said
oh,
someone
sorry,
takes
right,
$200,000.
okay. Yeah, I really don't want to call her name out at this point, but she's valued that. That's not the point, right? I mean, she's undervalued. The money is so small that she can only take some of what she's valued. That's the point I'm trying to make. The other part is that blacks in plantation, let's say, who go door to door, Some kids who end up getting arrested because, they're not welcome in Plantation, by the way, which is the city of our former county chairs. So when you're having blacks being harassed, right, for speaking their mind and being active, and this party doesn't stand up for them. You have like a Dale Holness and a Perry Thurston who actually has to go rescue these kids, but other members of the Democratic Party, especially white members, are not standing up for what's going on for black kids and what they have to face when they try to be active like you are being active and celebrated for and try to go door to door and some of the harassment that they face, then the party's failing them, okay? Now, blacks voted at one time, mostly Republican. Truman integrated the army, right? Blacks started to vote more. Then you had, JFK, blacks were like 55-45, Democrat to Republican, but voted like 70+%. Now blacks are registered like 75% Democrat, but they vote like 90+% on average, right? Listen, the party is ignoring blacks to the point that it's going to take other blacks advocating and coming outside of the Democratic Party for blacks within the Democratic Party to be empowered. And I think that sucks. I'll just stop there.
So my name is Tiffany. I'm part of the Black Lives Matter Alliance Broward, and I also was on the Take Down Racist Street Sign campaign. So from what I'm hearing from you is that, like, according to black people, the Democratic Party is obsolete. That's what it sounds like. And so if that is the case, because I know with the Take Down Racist Street Sign campaign, the involvement on the Democratic Party was actually like at a level 0. I don't know if other people from the campaign want to speak on that. There's several of us here. What do people like?
I'll be happy to.
I mean,
I will absolutely.
I think you have to come to the mic because they're doing a Facebook Live and I don't think people will hear you. It's okay? Okay, you guys are good. Never mind, it's not live. Just kidding. Go ahead. Oh.
Okay, and so I guess like with that being said, my major question is like, what are your actual plans to get black people to actually believe that the Democratic Party is not obsolete, because it's seeming from even your own words that it is? And then two,
Ooh, not my words.
Actual.
I never said that.
I think there's a problem. I'm saying that. But all right, we got,
and
okay.
then two, like, what issues are you actually gonna say that you're gonna take a stance on, like actively? Like, cause the Hollywood Street Sign campaign was like an everyday struggle. It wasn't like just a one-time thing, kind of like what you were saying earlier. It was a constant struggle, every single commissioner's meeting, knocking on doors almost every single day, going like, planning actions, planning protests, like, we didn't get any sleep over that. So for some people to claim that they helped on that and they didn't, that's actually making us very resentful towards the Democratic Party. So like, how do you actually get in on the issues, like, and be at the meetings, come to the planning meetings, like all that stuff from like, not the very end, but like throughout the whole entire process, because there's a lot of like resentment towards the party.
Yeah, can you rephrase that a little shorter for us? Give us just that one question, like.
What are you gonna
do? Thank you. What are you gonna do now? There we go. All right, there you go. All right, thank you.
Uplift people and not for us to think that the Democratic Party is awesome.
For example, we need to fundraise.
Hold on, let them answer one question at a
Okay,
time.
We need to
So,
fundraise to get the streets changed. That is an immediate and tangible goal that the Democratic can help to do. We need to fundraise
Gotcha.
to change this. The
Gotcha,
city
gotcha.
commission doesn't want to do it. What is the Democratic Party gonna do about it? Because we need to raise funds,
Let
and
them
help
answer.
with that would be really great.
Okay.
Well, I know as a club, so, are you, you're a committee man, right?
No, actually, I'm no longer, actually,
well, I'm
by
sorry.
choice, so,
Okay.
yeah, I'm good.
So I'm glad you're here. I mean, we're a club, that's all. We're a club. And I would say, you had said something about, well, government's not gonna listen. What I've come to realize this year is there is no government. We're the government. Your actions are terrific and admirable, but that's what it takes to get anything moved in the world. Well, all of you, right?
Yeah.
So, I would
But-
say,
Yeah,
get
but-
on our group and, you in the Hollywood Democratic Club group and advocate, and, we have members here who are running for things, and that's the best that the club can do, or maybe we can do more. I mean, I don't know, stick with us. I think we're happy, and I don't think I'm wrong, I'd have to take it to our board, but I'm sure that we're happy. I mean, this is
was a member of, they take down Hollywood street signs. I am a member of the Democratic Party, the Broward Party, yes. I've talked to Hollywood Democratic members of this board. Yes, and I'm sorry. And I've talked to Broward Democratic committee members. And then at the last minute, I was told, we never knew about this. And I was told by one of the members from Hollywood, we didn't know about it, so.
And what's your name, by the way?
Carolyn Siegelman.
Carolyn Singh, yeah, so just, I mean,
I'm a
just so, I mean, you said BLM, the acronym, but just Black Lives Matter, so everybody
Black
else
Lives Matter,
knows, yeah,
Alliance
right,
Broward.
right, Alliance, yeah.
I'm a Broward Democrat member at large, because Plantation has too many,
Yeah,
and I can't find a home elsewhere.
Yeah, or you don't belong to the right group to get in there,
Yeah,
to not be at
exactly.
large, yeah.
But
there
I'm
we go.
getting very disillusioned with the Democratic Party. I'm just there to make sure they know issues, and they don't listen to their own party members when we bring up social issues. So that the Democratic Party wants to hear this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Period.
Say how you really feel, you know?
And I mean, this is, I mean, so they don't care about anybody. Never mind, certainly not the black people in this community.
Well,
Because-
look, the Democratic Party has been taking black folks for granted for a long time. And it's kind of like they just want to exploit them when they need them, and they don't really care too much when they don't. And that has to change. At the same time, I think that there's still a lot that can be done through the Democratic Party if we're smart about how to go about doing that. And that can't be just allowing them to keep doing what they want to do. It just cannot be. And because the one thing we know is that, you can't expect the structure of politics, the electoral structure, to be anything other than responsive to what's happening in the street, in the community. All the social change that ever has taken place did not start in the party. It came to the party, through the party. It came from the communities. It came from activists who were not necessarily doing it per the party. And that's the whole history of social change. I mean, that's what happens. So you've got to have a Black Lives Matter. You've got to have a peace movement. You've got to have all these things that ultimately will work their way through if you're smart about who you have in the party, paving the way for the impact of whatever is happening outside of the party to happen through the party to the maximum feasible extent. And that's just how the system works. So it's not irrelevant. The Democratic Party is not irrelevant, but it is jive. So
Define jive.
it's jive, meaning that it is not being what it says it's being in the way that it should be if it was really being what it's saying it's being. Okay?
We have room for probably one more question.
But what I was trying to get to the larger point about what the national thing, like you need electoral, you need redistricting. Look, a lot of this bullshit that's taking place has to do with gerrymandering, okay, and all this other crap, and that is why so much of what the Democratic Party would ostensibly even be doing is not getting done, because the technical work at the highest level of electoral politics has been hijacked by the criminal, slimy Republican game. That cannot just be abandoned in the name of community activism. It's got to be addressed, and it has to be addressed technically. So that's important work. Then the other thing is, like all these prisoners who can't vote, there's a whole bunch of, you can't vote, there's a lot of votes we're not getting. There's a lot of things that the Democrats would do if they were in a better position, but they're not necessarily doing the technical work. They keep getting their lunch eaten by the Republicans on the technical game. So if you care, that's opportunity to get in there and get that part going. And I'm telling you that if we don't get that done with the Democratic Party, then all of the street activism will not translate into the policies that will help advance the thing as substantially as is needed.
Okay, this is the last question. I'm gonna take someone from that side just because we haven't. But do know that once we're done with this question, like this conversation can continue. The hope is that it will continue beyond just a panel discussion. Otherwise, it was for naught because, the best versions of these conversations do not happen, like this. It should be happening within you. Before we set the stage, you have to ask her. Okay.
Democratic Party starts with us, me and everybody here. How do you do it? Number one, you join a club. There's a lot of new people here. Join, it's only $15 a year. That's cheaper than cheap. Get involved with the club. Get involved and get out to vote. Vote first, and then early voting is what I do. Early voting, first day, and then I go out and I help campaign to one Democrats that are running for election. Done it for years. And then help out. Help us. But it all starts with us here. The Democratic Party is us. So we're saying the Democratic Party is bad. We're talking about ourselves. We're not the Republican Party. You want to talk about the enemy with the black hats and the white hats. That's the Republican Party, not the Democratic Party. See how they're screwing up the Republican Party? And we're fighting among ourselves? Let's not fight among ourselves. Let's go out and vote and campaign and run for office. Run for office. It was proven in Alabama.
But we have to stand for the right thing.
District.
We have to.
Let me make a
We have to.
hang on a second. Let me make a point.
We have to stand for the right things, and we have to hold the people we elect accountable as well. It can't just be Democrat. It's got to be a Democrat who's going to actually fight and push effectively for the things that will make a difference with respect to what we want. That's it.
Let me.
I'm just.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm just amplifying. I'm not disagreeing with him. I'm amplifying. What does it mean to be a Democrat? Is the question ultimately.
Yeah. Can I ask one question real quick? Can I get it real one quick question? Again, 1 minute, that may turn to two. I'd like to just do a poll of everyone here, right? You tell me what I'd like to know based on even what this gentleman said. I believe that he believes that wholeheartedly. How many of you are satisfied
By show of hands.
by show of hands, right, to continue to just be a Democratic Party where it's all about getting out the vote, GOTV, sometimes it's souls to the polls, it's going to be Muslims to the polls, it's going to be Hispanic to the polls. Does that satisfy you as well as just voting and going door to door and knocking on doors? How many of you are satisfied to just continue like this? Raise your hands if it's all, for those in here, that's all about get out the vote, and that will satisfy you, and working and knocking door to door, that you don't want more. Raise your hands if you're satisfied with that.
Well, what are you?
Why can't we have more within
Versus
our party?
actually doing better, actually realizing that it takes more than that,
Because your party has failed the residents of this city and this county and this state repeatedly.
Are you a Republican?
Country.
No, it's not about being a Republican.
I'm a Democrat. I grew up, I graduated high school in this
Well, I don't
county,
think-
and I'm telling you,
I'm
based
from
on what
Miami-Dade,
I've
and our
seen on the
party
ground,
hasn't done much
until
for us
we
either,
have-
white or black.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Doesn't that upset you though? Don't you want more?
State party, the travesty that was the state party chair who was elected, and the people who allowed this to happen, and now he's resigned in disgrace, is an embarrassment. I'm coming from
So
20
who was
years in
there
the Midwest.
electing him? Where were all the people who would have voted for someone else, and where were the other
I'm
someone else?
asking you that. I'm coming from the Midwest, and I know who I voted for in Indiana. I'm asking the question for City of Hollywood, where I grew up. My parents are here. I'm here as a caregiver. We've lived in Hollywood since 1975. I'm asking the old guard, what are you doing for the people who need it? After Hurricane Irma, why did it fall to all of my brothers and sisters, all of my comrades here, who made sure that there was water and ice and food for the people in the poorest neighborhoods? The people of color and the people most at risk and the elderly were left at risk. And as much as I respect
We have to be honest about this, folks. I mean, I'm talking about, and I hate to, the reality is that if you look at, there's elections that happen right now in Fort Lauderdale, predominantly especially in black neighborhoods, people don't know the elections are happening. When you go to their website, right, these candidates, who a lot of them now are black, right, they're not listed. It's not easy to get that information. But if you go to Plantation, right, where sadly enough the Republicans control, even though we have Democratic leaders that live there, you have nice, neat information. Why isn't it in Deerfield, in Pompano, in Fort Lauderdale, nobody's advertising there's an election right now? If you go to get information on who's running, you got to scrape it off a PDF. I mean, listen, there are real problems here, I just want to let you all know. I love my party. I've run across, done so much to this party. I've left my mom sick with congestive heart failure, and she told me stay out there in Tampa and work for this party. I love my party, but I'm just telling y'all, there's some problems, and we got to realize it.
So
if we
on
don't
that
deal with
note-
this, I'm sorry.
We can keep on going, I'm sure.
We need to abolish the electoral
But-
college.
But thank you all so much for joining us in this conversation. Thank you, Corey and Don, for participating in this conversation. It sounds like there's a lot of reckoning to do among yourselves, and I've heard, it seems, two factions and two different thoughts on what is happening within the Democratic Party and what can be better. So your next meeting hopefully will be just as interesting.
So I want to thank Unity 360 Race Dialogues. For those who are interested, sponsored by South Florida People of Color and Take Down Slavery Symbols Hollywood. This is a book.
So give me a card.
A
Did
discussion.
you have a job?
Facilitated
Talking
discussion
all
by
this
Dr.
militant
Abita
shit,
Haas
you-
and Georgiana Hart,
getting a
January
paycheck.
27th at the
You're
Hollywood
funny.
Library.
We have to check on it, we'll check it.
So,
Fit the
I want
millennials
to say
who have
two
jobs.
things, if that's okay. First of all,
Not managing.
I think that the whole reason that I was interested in this conversation was to sort of bubble it all up, right? I think that's important, and I know, Stacy and I have only been running this club for a few months since April, and our hope is that people in the community come. I mean, it's not our policies. It's that the community members come and instill their values and their policies, and they decide what's important for the club. That was our hope. We really didn't come in and say, I want this issue, I want that. In fact, quite the opposite. What we said is, we want to create a place where there's engagement and people can come and bring forward issues that people rally behind. So we as a club, I know we would like to help put out what we can, use our resources, as funny as they are, to promote the issue, here in our community, of course. So let's talk offline or right after this. Second of all, I think it's interesting. There's so much passion, and I want there to be, and I hate to use this because my daughter's in college, but a safe space to have very angry, vigorous conversations. Discussions. Without it, we're doomed. And I don't just mean as a party. I mean, I am in the Democratic Party, I believe in it, but I believe in what our country can be. I believe in those things. They're not all perfect. A lot of them stink right now. But this is one of the processes. So I want to thank everybody. Yes. This has been. I'm sorry?
Can I make an announcement about it?
Yes, you may. Come on up. They will kick us out at 9 p.m. on the nose. It's astounding. So.
Don't forget to give me a card.
So I want to personally invite everybody in the room to a discussion that I will be facilitating. It's going to be in Miami, but it's called How We Get Free.
and it's analyzing the Combahee River Collective Statement, which is a group of really dope, radical Black and brown women who pretty much wrote a statement about Black feminism. And I think that would address a lot of issues when it comes to like how we organize, especially in South Florida, because a lot of the things that were made in the statement, which was in 1974, so a little bit over 40 years ago, is still relevant today, and especially like the local political climate, and especially going into 2018. So I think that would be a really great discussion for you guys to participate in. It's going to be Saturday, January 13th, and it's going to be located in Miami, and it's at a place called Miami Worker Center, which is 745 Northwest 54th Street, and you enter on 55th Street.
Will you send it to me and I can post it on our group, or you can just join our group and post it yourself, but you have my.
Definitely. So that's like my formal invitation to invite everybody. Hope to see you there. It's 10 a.m.